All right, welcome to this afternoon's panel. I am again and still Nick Johnson for the Ethereum Foundation and the ENS Ethereum Name Service Project. I'm just going to get the other panelists to give a brief reintroduction and then we'll get on to questions.
Introduction? Yes. Hello, again, Andres Junge from Uport.
Well, I'm still Fabrice Croiseau from Intech and working on Ethereum Decentralized Digital Identity Trust Services.
And Antoine from Intech working on edits too.
All right, I'm going to start with a couple of really easy questions for the whole panel and then I'll open up to you guys in the audience. Just if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and we'll rush to you with a microphone. So my first question for all the panelists is, what do you think the biggest barrier is to getting widespread adoption of decentralized identity today?
What is blocking identity adoption?
What's the biggest barrier to wide adoption?
Well, I think we're following the Ethereum mass adoption. We're facing the same problems. It's hard technology for people to understand right now, but as they're seeing the value of it, I think adoption will come together. So
to me, the availability of a very, very simple, usable wallet. Because today, as I said before, MetaMask is working, other kind of wallets are working, even Ledger is working, but they're still very difficult to use and to configure, and it's hard for people to understand that if they lose their keys, they can lose all their money. So we really need a solution that handle all these problems in a user-friendly way to make blockchain accessible to everybody. This is the biggest barrier, I think.
Yes, for the user perspective, I think the wallet and the way to hold the key and to securely keep the key is a big problem. And for the developer perspective, the cost of deploying some smart contract and the transaction cost on Ethereum can also be problematic for some use cases.
Second question is, given the fact that the identity solutions that most of you are pursuing involve a trusted authority who's signing a certificate for a particular identity, how important is it to focus on reducing trust in the rest of the system? Is that still necessary? And what lengths do you go to in order to do it? And I'll start with you this time. How important is it to minimize the trust needed in a system like this, given that you already have a trusted issuer?
The objective of the platform like Edits is to, you don't have to trust one entity or another organization. You have to choose who you can trust and who you cannot trust, and it's free to the user, free to the service provider to accept some entities and to have trust in some entities or an organization.
Yes, so the trust is the trust on information is between two actors: the one who owns the information and the one I give this information. I want this information to be accepted, to be trusted by this guy. So it depends. After, I think, two things: the legal value of what I'm doing is still important, because if I want to have legal value behind the transaction I'm making, I must have a trust, a third party that is recognized by the court. If I have problem, if I'm in front of the court, I must be able to prove that the information I gave is the right one. And then, in this case today, at least, I have to have somebody that is trusted by the court itself before. So it's a legal entity. It could be advocates, notary, etc., etc. Otherwise, if I'm in an exchange with anybody and I want him to trust me, we can use what is the same kind of decentralized trust that has been created by Uport. I don't know if it's by Uport or by somebody else, but the first time I saw that is with Uport, where you give the ability to few peoples to give trust on your information if these people are independent enough of you and of the guy you are giving your information. You can do that. So today you have different way of giving this trust. The goal is to use only blockchain and no other platform in the trust path. And after it really depends on do you want to have legal value or not to know who are the third parties you have to trust.
Yeah, I agree with them. Basically, what we're doing here is like we are decentralized the trust on identity. Right now, we only need we trust our governments or trust different corporate attester for bringing the identity information. But with these new technologies, we can have a group of friends attest something. For example, if instead of reading of a good what is a good restaurant here in Paris, I prefer to read attestations from some friends instead of a very specific magazine or something like that. That will allow a completely different way of interacting with identities and trust between us. And also, right now we trust the source, but in the future probably we can trust some sources, but also we can add trust to by quantity. For example, the refugees, sometimes they came and they don't have any ID or anybody that can attest their names or their birthday, but they come with other 100 refugees. So for NGO, probably it's more important that they have 100 attestations saying this is their name instead of saying this government attest that's the name. So we can build models based on the number of attestations instead of the source of the attestation. So that will change the game completely for many use cases.
All right. Questions from the audience. If you have a particular person you want to address it, say. Otherwise, we'll just open it up to the panel.
Yes. So a question for the whole panel. With off-chain private information, which is verified on-chain, there's a problem when the company that has received the private information leaks by accident or on purpose the information, because then it could be made public forever. How do you think we can solve this problem?
I don't think we can solve that problem. If I give you my name, if I give it encrypted or whatever, you should decrypt it somehow. There's no way to prevent. There's no way I can prevent that you will store their information or leak it somewhere else. We are building technology that helps you not to store that, but there's nothing that prevents you to store that. Also, sometimes you don't need to provide the whole information. For example, if you want to know that I am older than 18 or 21, instead of I giving you my birthday, maybe you can query in a homomorphic encryption way how old am I without knowing exactly my birthday. But as long as you know I'm old, you can still leak that information. So, sorry, we cannot prevent that. I mean, I don't know how to.
Maybe I agree that it's not. There is no way to solve it definitely. But one path in this direction is instead of asking for the information you want to check, you ask for the check itself directly. For example, instead of asking for the age of the guy because he wants to access some certain specific website, you ask him, are you an adult or not? So you don't know the age. If I want to open a bank account, I don't need your name, I just want to know if you are allowed to open a bank account. So if you are not a terrorist, if you are not politically exposed people, etc., if you are not in bankrupt, but I don't know the name, I know the profile. And maybe it's to go from a list of very small granularity information to certain kind of profile, and this kind of profile will be anonymous, but the only thing you know is that this guy behind this Ethereum address is able to open a bank account with this list of countries. You don't know who is he, you don't know if he's adult or not, you just know that he can do that or not. And for lots of kind of claim you need, it can be sufficient without disclosing all the identity of everybody. Yes, okay.
Hi. So I would like to turn this in a little bit different way. That, in my opinion, like the decentralized identity. In the decentralized identity, there is always a trade-off between privacy and a fallback. Yes, we can't have both. Like it's either fully private and decentralized, or we provide some fallbacks. Hence, like these solutions we described here, not work for a mass adoption. So, what do you think about like adopting a different kinds of identity, like using biometrics, something that will identify myself not in an artificial way, but something that myself I'm a fallback?
I mean, others may be able to answer this better than I, but one of the issues with biometrics is that they're inherently a fuzzy parameter. You can't easily cryptographically prove that your fingerprint is a close match for the one that's stored, and you don't want to store the original fingerprint on chain because then anyone can imitate you.
So the idea might be is that, for example, we can have a device. Okay, I'm not a cryptographic expert, but I guess it would be possible that we can have a device that will translate our biometrics, not only the fingerprint, but some neurons or heartbeat. There are things which are really unique for the people into a kind of a key sequence. So even so that I will lose the device we can have an algorithm, yes, which will constantly generate new keys based on that unique features, and use that set of the keys, the sequence of the keys to provide a fallback or to identify myself on the blockchain. So I mean, there must be some key, yes, at the end of the day, but I think what we are missing here, like when we are talking about the identity and the mass adoption, is that this traditional way where we just offer one key to the guy, just simple doesn't work. So what do you think about that? Where should we go with it? Because if I will offer it to my mother, like she's, oh, why? What have I? How can I deal with it? Yes, in a traditional way, yes, it's a government who is issuing. So if I lose my ID card, I can always go to government and get a new one, and I don't know, make a photo to whatever.
Yeah, maybe I can answer on that one. So I mean, on the end, this is exactly, for example, what the ERC-725 is about, is creating a container. It's also UPort the ID specs. It's about creating containers for many keys and for different ways of how you can basically like replace them. For example, in the ERC-725, you have different type of keys, and the keys you normally use and interact are the action keys, which are not the ones which can overtake your identity or alter your identity. And also concerning the biometric data, I think probably in the future we will have ways to derive like some uniqueness out of our biometric data, or the simple thing would be, I mean, you have to do it reliably, but I mean the simple thing is you could just put a chip in your hand. I mean, that's kind of crazy, but I mean that's most likely what will happen. And I mean the idea here really is to create frameworks to standardize these kind of like containers of keys and claims. And claims can be biometric data. I mean, either it's a zero-knowledge proof container, which then can verify your biometric data, or it's another provider like the state or whatever, who saw you once, and then there's an API callback, and you just send the data points there, and they say yes or no, it's him or not. And yeah, I mean, on the end, once we have standardized the containers, everything else, like what gets put into them, that's another question. That's how I see it.
Yeah, to add what Fabian says is basically we're separating the key management with the identity. You basically have identity, and a way to control your identity. If you control with a key, with a pair of keys, with a multi-sig account that some keys are owned by the state or by whatever you trust, or by your biometric derived key somehow, will still have control of your identity. So all the fallback methods, we can build we have a lot of freedom to build very different kinds of ways to do it, as long as the identity remains permanent on the blockchain, and we have a way to control that with different kinds of keys.
And if I can add something to the question earlier, when it's about can data be leaked, right? I mean, first off, today we are in the worst situation. Like, basically, you always hand over your data at all times completely. No question asked, you know, you show the card, they can just read everything, or you give credit cards away, you know, and they make like copies or whatever, in the past even. And the other part is, yeah, so data can be leaked, but in the ideal situation, we are not actually giving away the data anymore, but we're just giving away the claim itself, like the reference of the claim. Because in most cases, if I'm a bank, I just need to know, okay, he is a human and he has an address. In the least cases, or only in the case when I actually need to access the address, I need to know where. And probably in the future, your postal service would just send them to IDs, and the postal service knows where to route them. Like, I don't need to know exactly where you live in order to send you a hardware mail or so. So I think it's more about like kind of the claims itself. And the other interesting aspect is you could shield claims with many claims. So instead of actually having each single property claimed, or like different claims for each property, you can have like packages, right? Like, is this guy able to access this? And then there's somebody who issues a claim, yeah, we proved all of these things. You never need to know them, but if you trust us, you can give him this or that, you know. And I think it's kind of like these kind of things will happen to obfuscate that. And then the leakage of data is the worst case. Okay, you know, he could have exited that system or not, kind of.
I think it's worth noting too that there's a number of questions you might want to answer with identities, and a lot of them fundamentally rely on a central authority, like, is this person a British citizen? Is this person over 18? Things like that are very difficult to answer authoritatively unless you point to somebody and say, yes, they are the authority on who is over 18 or who is a British citizen. And biometrics can help protect your authorization, your authentication data, but they can't prove those things about you.
One problem I see, and correct me if you think it's solved, is that identity is also consisted of many things that we don't really want to publish. So a bank would also want to know if you have another account with a bank with a debt or something, and if you're able to withhold it with, like, have another identity account or anything else, then how useful is this identity actually?
But you can choose what to share with other parties and what to keep secret. Of course, you don't want to share all the identities, all the claims that you are holding in your identity. But with selective disclosure or some kind of private claims that can be stored off-chain, and you can give the consent to somebody to see this information, but not to everybody.
So I think the question is also what prevents you from using that selective disclosure to your advantage? What if you just decline to disclose all of your bankruptcies, for instance?
Maybe one idea here is I would actually make the difference between identity and reputation, right? Reputation is basically just a summarization of others saying things about me, and identity is like what I approve. It's kind of a subset of reputation, I would say. Because, for example, in the self-sovereign identity space, it's about, you know, there are claims being made and I approve them and I kind of can reject them also. And the reputation system would tell you, okay, they say, you know, he's like not valid. He like made a bunch of debt or so. And there's the question of exactly how this could be accessible or where this could be stored. For example, the ERC 780 could be a reputation system, or you could have, I mean, could it be based on points? Or I don't know, and it's hard to tell. I mean, right now we have in Germany the Schufa system, you know, which is just a score you get based on whatever they saw. So I think this is two different systems, and they have to probably only cross-reference or so.
sorry. Well, it's, for example, if I'm convicted, that's really like a hard claim about my identity. It's not reputation. I'm convicted, and probably they are not allowed to give me some services or something. I don't know, by law or something. So this is part of identity. So if I'm able to actually have this claim attached to my second identity, so I'm doing like a cyber attack or something, then in the end, somebody who is serious about it can't really trust anybody, any identity account, because maybe I'm actually also convicted, but it's just not attached to the one that I provided.
I would say the difference is here, the ones which has your physical person connected will probably be the one which wants to be at first convicted and second wants to be checked against. Probably not your game identity, you know, it might be a fine person. But yeah.
I think another way to handle this too is to have negative claims. So you could be required to release information about the claim by the corrections department that you have no convictions. And if you can't present that, then that tells you something.
Okay. Okay, I have a question concerning, just something we discussed before, like separating the access and giving access with a certain identity. You have different providers here, and the data itself, the data management, because the data is still the same. So I think it would be interesting to separate both, just to gather all these different data, mutualize the data management in this case, gathering all these biometrics or any type of identity, personal data.
Did you?
I just want on the question that you made before about this leaking of information. I think it's very important to distinguish that if you prove me something to me, I can publish this proof. And this is one thing, and the other thing is you publish something to me, and I am claiming that you are whatever. These two things are different. Of course, I can claim whatever I want, but there are systems where you can disclose some information to me, and I cannot reuse this information to the rest of the people. Because maybe he's giving me a zero knowledge proof about that thing, or maybe that we know that he knows just released random number at that moment. So this proof is going to be, it can be both things. It can be a proof of that claim exists, or that just a random number exists. Yeah, but this proof is going to be useless, because this proof can also mean that's just that I knew a random number at the given. No, it's a proof. Where the question is not only about the claim; it's about the claim and that I know a specific random number. So that proof is useless, except in the context of where you are proving on. Yep.
Does anyone that isn't in the small corner of the lecture theatre have any questions? Yep, the exact opposite corner.
Maybe it's an open question, but you mentioned it in your presentation about FIDO UAF implementation. So you mentioned more or less how have a safe storage about the keys. So I wanted to really know, because I don't know the deep inside about FIDO, all of you, which solution do you find to really have a safe storage and of the keys, and what are you willing to achieve in the case of FIDO instead the hardware wallet? Because I didn't get it well.
So with FIDO, you have company are creating FIDO compliant devices that generate and store private keys, private and public keys also. And these keys are used to make the third factor authentication. Okay. And what we want to do is to use these devices and the key generated and stored on these devices to sign the Ethereum transaction because they are compatible. We have seen that by chance the protocol used by FIDO is compatible by the one used by Ethereum. So we can sign an Ethereum transaction with a FIDO device or something like that, with a FIDO device, so that it's the responsibility of the FIDO device to store the key, to make them to leave them in security. After, if you lose the FIDO device, if you lose the key, then you fall back to the way of recovering key, either handled by your implementation or ERC 735 or the way it's proposed by Uport to recover the key when you lose one. But the idea here is that the private key itself, you never get it. It's always managed by the FIDO device, and it's the FIDO device that signs the transaction. It's the same way that it works today with Ledger, but it's more standard because it uses FIDO. FIDO stands for Fast Identity Online, so it's compatible with FIDO standards, so it's more interoperable.
The question, first question, can a system where you have persistent identifiers pointing to individuals, can it ever be GDPR compliant? I mean, the fact that I asked this question, you can assume what my own answer would be. And the second thing that I would like to ask to Andres and the people from Intech.lu is that, I mean, the public blockchains, aren't they a better fit for actions of legal entities instead of human beings because of GDPR? And also the fact that there's often there's a mandatory requirement that some actions of legal entities are public, and then a public blockchain is a good fit.
Regarding GDPR, so it's true that when something is on the public blockchain, you can't remove it. And one of the assessment of GDPR is that somebody can ask to remove his personal information from the provider. The problem with blockchain is here there is a thing that has not been handled by GDPR, that there is no provider behind blockchain. So if I take my information, even if there have been, this is the case, I take the information that has been created by a certification authority, I have, these are my information, and I take them, I put them in the blockchain, so I consent to put them on the blockchain. Here I'm compliant with GDPR because I give my consent to put them, because I put them on the blockchain myself, so I give my consent on the blockchain. The problem is that they can't be removed. So it's not handled at all today by any lawyers. We have spoken with lots of lawyers. The only thing is that you have a very strong disclaimer that tell the end user that when this information will be on the blockchain, they won't be removable at all, etc., etc. But since you have no provider to go to when we want to remove them, it's not possible. And so it's not completely compliant to GDPR, but it's not uncompliant at all. Also because it's just not for, handled by the GDPR regulation as it is today. So, yeah. So the question is that as a user, maybe I don't want my personal information to be put in the public blockchain and to stay there until the end of time. So it's true. So today, this is the way. So we propose to do that if we see that nobody wants to put his personal information on the public blockchain, even to invest in ICOs or something. We'll have to find another way. Maybe we'll change to only put the CSN, the certificate number, identification number. It's more anonymous, but it's linked to the it's also a personal information because it's possible to know the identity from this anonymous number. So we have to put something on the blockchain to link the blockchain address with the identity at least. So But maybe I agree that maybe first name, last name are too much for some people. Yeah.
So
one last question.
I apologise if you've already mentioned this, but I only caught the last few minutes of the talk prior to this panel. But do you have any plans to allow users to monetize their ID? For example, by selling aspects of the information to market research companies or maybe even governments to fund things like increased participation in voting, for example?
So I think this is a good question for everyone. For ENS, no, because we don't have any of that data anyway.
Yes. Since you have control of your data, you can exchange your data on something like money, some benefits or whatever. So basically, and you can have a smart contract for that as a escrow. So as long as they put the money on the escrow, you exchange your data and you receive the money back. Yeah, it's completely doable.
So today we have not worked on that, but definitely yes, it's a possibility. And the idea behind it is that, as you probably all of you know the famous phrase, if you don't pay, you are the product. So it's not you are the product, but your information are the product. Instead of allowing big companies to make money with this information, if your information have values, you should be able to get the value directly by yourself. And yes, ideally, there are business model behind this model of identity.
Yes, and I think there is always some platform allowing you to monetize and to sell your data. And I think there is business model for this. And you can also sell anonymous data, because some brand can be interested by consumption data without knowing your name, your age, or your address. So I think there is a use case, and it can be very, very interesting to have a platform allowing you to sell some data, not all, not personal information, but some kind of consumption data. Why not?
And the good thing with this kind of data is that with the blockchain technology, it's possible to prove that these are real data. These are not fake data you are creating just to sell them, but they are not related to your real behavior. Here, with we need something else around the smart contract, but it's definitely possible to prove that the data that you sell to the company are the right data, your real behavior, by eventually by connecting to IoT things, you can prove that this is really what you have done.
Well, that's all we have time for. So if you'd all give a round of applause to our panelists, thank you.